Hi, in this quick tip I'm going to try to provide a reasonably brief answer to a question that a number of people have sent me, and it's on the question of modulation. What does modulation mean? It means changing key from one key to another key, and the people asking questions are asking, how do we do that? Or people have said, well, I've tried to change key in a piece that I've written, and actually it doesn't sound very good because there's a kind of sort of big bumpy moment when we suddenly go from one key to another. And it possibly sounds a little bit like a driver trying to change gear without using the clutch. And if you're a driver, you'll know what that does. Anyway, let's have a quick look at how to modulate, how to change key. I've written a short piece on the board there. It's 8 bars long, 2 phrases. We're in the key of D major, and the first phrase is in D major, and the second phrase modulates to A major. So how do I do that? Well, if you want to have a really smooth modulation that effectively uses that musical clutch very nicely, you have to use something called a pivot chord. Now, what is a pivot chord? A pivot chord is a chord that's common to the key that you're leaving and to the key that you're joining. So we're going from D major to A major. And what you'll find is that there are some chords in D major that also come in A major, which is quite useful. So here's a scale of D major. And if I put chords on all those notes by taking the bottom note in each case of the scale and adding the third and the fifth note above it, I get these chords. That's what we call chord 1 or a chord of D, chord 2 or a chord of E minor, chord 3 or a chord of F sharp minor, chord 4 or a chord of G, chord 5 or a chord of A, chord 6 or a chord of B minor, chord 7 or a C sharp diminished, and then I come back to chord 1 again, which is that chord of D. Now, if I go through the scale of A major, I can also put chords in the same way. So here's A major. Here's the first chord, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and then I come back to the first. Now, if I look at some of those chords in A major, I'll discover they're also chords in D major. So if I look at chord 1 in A major, which is a chord of A, well, that's also chord 5 in the scale of D. So in other words, this could be a pivot chord because it belongs to both the keys. If I look at chord 2 in A major, which is a chord of B minor, well, that's also in the scale of D major, because in D major, that's a chord 6. If I look at chord 3 in A major, well, that doesn't come in D major, mainly because it's got a G sharp and there's no G sharp in D major. So that could not be a pivot chord. This one, chord 4, which is a chord of D major, is also chord 1 in D major. So it's 4 in A major, it's 1 in D major, so that would be a good pivot chord. Chord 5 in A major is no good to us because it's got a G sharp in it, so that's not a chord in D major. Chord 6 in A major, or a chord of F sharp minor, well, that's also in D major, it's chord 3. Chord 7 in A major, that's not going to work again because it's got a G sharp in it. So you see, some of these chords are not common to the two keys, so you could not use those as pivot chords. But there are quite a few chords that are common to the two keys, so you could use any of those as pivot chords. So what I've done in this case, I've started writing in D major, and I've put the chord numbers underneath in the key of D, and I've put these chords in the middle if you prefer to read it that way. And then from this point onwards, all the chords are in A major because we've modulated to the new key. But this is the chosen pivot chord because this chord is chord 1 in D major. It's a D chord, D, F sharp, and it would have A in it to complete the chord. But that chord, D, F sharp, A, is chord 1 in D major, but it's also chord 4 in A major. So I like to think of a pivot chord as like passing through a door. I'm in this room, I want to go to the next room. I can't walk through the wall. I can't just appear in the next room. I have to go through the door. The door connects this room with the next room. The door is kind of like the pivot chord. So this is our musical door, this pivot chord. I'm choosing a chord that belongs to this key and belongs to that key, and this is the moment at which I walk through the door. And therefore it's going to sound perfectly smooth. We're not going to get any bumps. We're not going to be changing from one key to another without using the clutch because we've used a pivot chord. If we just fly into the new key without using a pivot chord, that's when it's going to bump. So what does all this sound like? Well, let me just play you from the beginning. This is what we've got on the board. Here's the pivot chord. So you can hear that I've started in the key of D, I finished in the key of A, and really the modulation wasn't a bumpy corner at all because I used that pivot chord. So that's how you do it. You decide which key you're starting in, you decide which key you want to go to, then you look for the possible pivot chords and you decide which one you're going to use. And to the left of the pivot chord, you're in the original key. To the right of the pivot chord, you're in the new key. Well, there's a lot more that one could say about modulation and about using all these chords. And if you want to know more about that, then have a look at the advanced theory package that we've made at Music Matters, which really covers all this in a lot more detail. But at least in this film, you can see how to modulate. Have fun with it.